Hey everyone. Hey everyone, welcome to the webinar on how to pivot from weddings to commercial photography. My name is Levi Tijerina, and I'm excited to be leading this conversation for us. I'm going to be sharing a lot of my journey. In the meantime, we're going to give people a few minutes to trickle into the room. I threw some polls that you could answer. The first one I'm most curious right now is about your primary source of income, whether you're making that from weddings or not from weddings or from photography or other forms of photography. So go ahead and answer that poll. And there are a couple other polls in there that we'll kind of answer throughout the question as well, or throughout the webinar as well too. So go ahead and jump in there if you get the chance. You can drop some messages into chat. Let's make sure everyone can chat here. But we're really excited to have everyone here for the day. So go ahead and answer those polls. And if you have any questions, there's a Q&A tab. Go ahead and go over to the Q&A tab and drop questions there that you have either now or later on during the webinar. I'd love to make sure we address questions that you have, and we can even get kind of a head start on kind of thinking about what you're thinking about, maybe even direct the conversation in some of those ways as well too. So make sure you head over there. Awesome. Cool. See 4 responses so far on this. Hey, Jonas, thanks for joining in, man. Yeah, glad to chat. I'm curious, for those of you that are, if you guys want to drop in chat while we're here, I'd love to hear about if you're doing wedding photography, what kind of wedding photography you're doing, if it's primarily doing destination or travel or localized weddings, or if you're doing another job. It might be helpful to see what other people are working on as well too, because I'm sure there might be a lot of camaraderie between where people are currently working. So drop that in. Hey, Gene, love you, man. Awesome. Right. There's going to be another poll that we'll get to in a little bit called what kind of worker you are. And I'm going to kind of go over various different things that I've kind of taken away from my years working as a wedding photographer and in a creative agency. So you can hold off on that poll for now. If you kind of peeked ahead, you can look at that already. I'm going to have all these slides available as a handout during this webinar as well too. So you can go ahead and download the kind of the notes to take away from as well. Hey, Mark, nice to meet you, man. Glad you're here. Cool. Awesome. We'll just give it another few minutes or another minute or two, and then we'll dive in. If you guys are new to joining, my name is Levi Tijerina, and I'm really excited to kind of work on some of this stuff as well, kind of share my journey from weddings to commercial and everything in between. If you're joining in now, there's a couple polls in the polls category where you can answer about kind of what your primary source of income is, if it's in photography or weddings currently. And if you have any questions, you can drop them into the chat, or there's a Q&A for questions. And there's a chat function for if you want to have a general note, want to introduce yourself, or kind of let everyone know who you are. Awesome. Okay. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So first off, thank you everyone for taking time out of your day, whether you're here in the US or Canada. I know it's like the middle of the day, and if you're out in Europe, I know you're kind of into your evening. So thanks for taking the time. Again, my name is Levi Tijerina, and I worked as a wedding photographer for the better part of a decade. So when I was about 21, I ended up moving to Lithuania, which is kind of a small country if you're not familiar with Europe, a small country in the kind of the Baltic region that kind of borders Latvia and Poland and Russia. I was living there for about a year when I was starting my career, and I was working at a university. My wife was living in Colorado, where I currently live. Colorado is right in the middle of the country, if you're not familiar with Colorado, of the United States, that is. And we were doing long distance. And when I finally knew that we were going to be together, I ended up moving from Lithuania to Colorado. An American citizen, was born in Chicago and then grew up in the Midwest, but had never really lived in Colorado before. When I moved to Colorado, like a lot of young millennials, I knew I wanted to pursue a career that was going to be insightful for me, I had a bit more ownership over what I was doing, and a little more control over the process of my creating income. And when I was living in Europe, I kind of got a taste for photography and the opportunities that kind of provided to be self-employed. I actually had found Cole and Jakob from Nordica. They were one of the first wedding photographers I had ever discovered back at the time, and they were shooting weddings in Iceland, in Africa, and all over the world. And that's where I think I first took away, like, I think I could really travel with this position. I think I could go back to places like Lithuania. And so I kind of went really far into wedding photography. I was kind of really intentional in my SEO. And so this was about 2012 when I moved to the US. And then 2013, I had booked 7 weddings in Iceland, one in Tanzania, one in Luxembourg, and had started traveling kind of extensively for weddings, primarily at the time. So I was very prolific, I guess, in the wedding space inside of destination weddings, and much less locally. And I was doing that for about 5 to 7 years or so. And it was really a great job. I love the control that I had. I love the flexibility of my career. But I think I was asking a lot of questions. A lot of people out right now are asking, especially with COVID, is one, is this all that there is? What happens next? And two, like, what skills do I actually have to offer people outside of weddings? I think that's a really scary thing if you're 25 to 35 and you're asking yourself, man, like, besides photography, do I offer the world anything? And I think that a lot of us do. We just haven't really discovered more about what those things look like. So I see that hand, Dominic, Brad, I see that hand. So I think those things are definitely a scary place to be. And so when my daughter was born, she was born in 2017, we had to ask pretty hard questions about what was going to come next in our lives. My wife was pretty serious about not working full-time anymore. And she had worked full-time as a nurse, and she just did not want to be working on the floor. She was doing 12-hour shifts from mostly 7:30 or 6:30 a.m. to about 7:30 at night. So actually 13-hour shifts. And she knew that she didn't want to pursue things that same way. And I was asking those questions of myself too, is thinking, like, when my daughter is, 3, 4, 5 years old, do I want to be photographing weddings every weekend? Do I want to have time to go see their games or spend time with them during the weekends? And also just what do I have next? What's left? So at the time, my wife decided she wanted to go part-time, and a very good friend of mine had sold a company of his to a creative agency here in Colorado, in Boulder. And so they had asked me to come alongside. They had sold their creative agency as well as it was mostly a production company for video, and primarily they'd sold their wedding business as well. And so their wedding business was also owned by the agency, but they needed some place to transition that part of the business. So they needed someone to run the wedding side of it, but who also could kind of speak into the agency side as well. And after talking over with my wife, I decided that was probably going to be the best option for me, was to try to go into a new space, because that was a way for me to reinvent myself. And I think it was a very safe, very familiar, very close step. I could still be in weddings. I could work in a creative space. I could start transitioning in and out of other kinds of work, other kinds of creative work, primarily around photography. But it allowed me a very safe footing to step out and to try things out. And I had never had a salary in my entire life. So I was given a salary, and it was the first time I'd ever had a set amount of money coming to my bank account regularly, which was pretty incredible. That was a really relieving thing. And it allowed me to kind of realize that there was a lot of strengths in being an employee that I didn't think I had before. So I worked at the agency for about 6 months. I didn't last crazy long. But part of the reason for that was because the schedule that was put out there just wasn't conducive with what my wife and I had wanted for ourselves. When you're working for somebody, you jump when they ask you to jump, and you travel when they ask you to travel. And so I ended up traveling, 3-4 times a month. I was going to be gone for pretty consecutive back-to-back trips. And that was a pretty eye-opening experience, because I didn't really have any say in if I was going to do that or not do that. Additionally, when I was taking on weddings, my wife and I could decide if I was going to be gone for 2 weeks shooting weddings in Iceland, if we were okay with the amount of money I was going to be making. And if we weren't, I just said no to the jobs. Whereas with my job, I didn't get paid any more money if I was going to be gone in LA for 2 weeks. So that kind of changed a bit of our perspective around working for someone else. And since I had never really had a lot of experience working for someone else, it was kind of an eye-opening chance to see what was happening in the world. I was pretty late to the game. I was about 27 at the time. And so most people at this point have had jobs, but I had nothing to compare it to. So for me, I would feel like I was totally in this whole new realm of thinking. And that is where the step and the idea for moving into my own creative venture around commercial photography began. We're going to jump back into these slides here. Real quick, I do want to take some time to just make sure everyone has a chance to answer questions or answer some of these polls, or make sure that these chats are coming in here. Brad, great to see you, man. Aaron, great to see you, dude. Glad to hear. If you're just joining us now, there's some polls over here that you can answer about kind of how you currently make income, if it's through photography or if it's through other forms of weddings or non-photography. Awesome, cool. All right, let's kind of jump back into this a bit here. One of the things that I realized when I was working for somebody else is the value around currency. So before, when I was shooting weddings, the only thing I could measure my currency in really was money, because I had almost unlimited time. When it comes to the off season for weddings, you really don't do much unless you are, motivated or prolific. I kind of sat around a lot. I watched a lot of Breaking Bad, watched a lot of Mad Men. In March to April, probably even actually January to April, was a lot of time just like twiddling your thumbs and feeling a bit more concerned about how you're going to make income over the fall. And so hoping every day an email would come through. And I remember just emails not coming through. And so the currency I was trading at the time, or that I understood from wedding photography, was money. People pay me a job, pay me for a skill set, and I give them a product. I give them wedding photos that they can cherish for the rest of their life. As soon as I started moving over to the agency and working with other people, I realized pretty quickly that there was a lot more currencies that I was trading in that I just wasn't aware of. The most obvious one was my time. That's the one I think was a wake-up call for myself. The fact that I could be going for a long periods of time, working for a client, not receiving more money, showed that there was an imbalance in that currency in my life. But it's also really important to know that there are other forms of currency. So relationships are a huge form of currency that aren't leveraged, especially in the wedding industry, as well as experience. Experience is an incredible currency that we trade, whether you're getting hired for a job or moving into a new field or moving over from one particular company to another, that we don't often see the value of in wedding photography, because tends to be with wedding photographers and filmmakers, you're kind of a one-trick pony, that you have just your experience in the wedding world, and you don't know how to translate that into other things. So experience is a very valuable currency that often doesn't get treated as such. This is where I want to talk about the worker. And this is where, if you go into the poll, as we walk through some of these things, you can start answering these things for yourself, because I'm curious where everyone finds themselves in these things. So when I was working at the agency, my biggest takeaway was that there was at least 7, if not more. I'm trying to extrapolate this all into a larger format, either book or summary of some kind. But for now, we'll stick with the 7. There's at least 7 different types of worker personalities that exist. And you can work any of these personalities and still fit inside of weddings or any other job. But it's kind of important to know where you fit along the spectrum, because these things really do impact what kind of jobs you have and whether you thrive or don't thrive. The first and foremost is the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is how I see somebody who is serially starting new projects. I look at someone like Cole from Nordica and Jakob, who have Cola, who have Way Up North, have Nordica, probably a bunch of other things I don't know about. I think I fit into this category because I'm always looking to move skill sets into the next venture. Entrepreneurs usually they're not really flustered by risk. Risk is part of the game, and they want to kind of translate ideas into opportunities. A director is someone that is typically less self-starter. They don't typically start things on their own. Once you give them, but they're able to kind of cast a vision and take what you've given them and then direct it onto other people. So you can kind of get people to help people buy into the vision, help cast an overarching strategy, and help make sure people are aligned with where you're going. An artist is not an artist in the typical sense. When you think of art, you think of someone painting or drawing or having a very specific skill set. But as an artist, I think that you have a very unique creative approach to problem solving. So it's the creative application of problem solving. So my friend at the agency, Tim, he mentioned how he had this one shot. He was shooting a wedding at the time, and he had this drone shot. Just was not working. And so he ended up taking this shot and then just twisting the camera, basically just twisting the frame in post-production. and kind of making this really like cinematic, almost, you know, sci-fi looking film of like how the drone kind of pushes into the shot. And it really was like he had bad footage, bad weather conditions, bad lighting, but using a different way of approaching problem solving allowed him to kind of actually just think of a new way to solve that current situation. He was able to solve for bad lighting, solve for bad footage, and solve for a bad location by thinking differently about the problem. A producer is someone who can get things going, organized, and succinctly. So if you're on a commercial shoot, the producer is the one who's kind of aligning all the different positions, hiring all the different talent for each place. And I think the producer works in that way to kind of, but they often need a director to help them get where they need to go. They need to have clear direction on what they actually need to produce, because the problem that happens is if you don't give someone a lot of feedback about what they need to create, you kind of get the lowest common denominator of creation. The closer is how I view the salesperson. If you are good at closing a deal, this is you. And what a lot of wedding photographers lack in is the ability to close. You meet with a couple and your skill set isn't kind of tied into closing the sale. You can get them to meet you. You might be the nicest person ever. You might have the best work they've ever seen, but it can really hard sometimes to ask them for the sale and to say, hey, what does it take to get to the next step? And that can be a really scary place to be. So a closer is someone who takes sales and is able to take an opportunity and push that into actually landing money. The technician is going to be the person who is behind the scenes and cranking on a project. They can be given direction and they can just do a task. This comes down to typically being things like photo editing, video editing, storyboarding, copywriting, narrative development. These things are often less creative as much as they are just brute force making your way into something. And I think a lot of wedding photographers imagine that wedding photography is pure creativity, but a lot of it is simply brute forcing your way through ideas and through situations and problems. So I think it's really important to think about the technician as that person that's doing some of that stuff. The technician is able to look at the work that they're given, the photos, the video, et cetera, and make something out of that. The last person, of course, is the unskilled worker. And this isn't to say that they don't have skills or potential. It just means someone that doesn't really apply themselves to the job that they're in. They're looking for taking a paycheck, to check out, don't have any engagement or loyalty to the brand, but they are there for a job because everyone needs a job. Let me bring that back up here. So thinking about all these different roles was what really got me thinking about what happens next inside of my career, because I had to look at my own skill sets and say, where do I actually fit? Because if I was just a closer and great at sales, maybe it didn't make sense to be a photographer anymore. And if I was only a technician, only editing photos and taking photos, there really is a kind of a cap of how much money you can make. And this is part of the problem that we face as wedding photographers, is that if you can do 25 weddings a year at $4,000 a pop, you're almost always going to max out at 100 grand. And you can maybe charge a bit more money if you're good at sales or good at business, or you can shoot more quantity if you're not going to get burnt out. But there typically ends up being a cap of between $100,000 to $150,000 you can make pre-taxes. And if you're in a place like the US where taxes are around 30%, if you're making 100 grand, pretty soon before expenses and everything else you're looking at, you're going to be making a $55,000 to $60,000 salary, shooting 25 weddings at $4,000 a piece. And so when I was in that position of looking for what's next, I had to say, where can I leverage my skills and how do I actually get things moving forward? What's the next progression of where I'm going? So the question for myself was, what was I going to be? Was I going to be an entrepreneur, a technician? Was I just going to take photos? And these are all really important things to think about as you're looking to grow your career and pivoting, because it's not a pivot away from something, but it's much more important to be pivoting towards something. One thing I think I value in the things that I've learned is that there's almost no personal value for you to focus on the things for you to build skills where you're lacking. If you're not good at sales, I think it's probably more of a waste of your time to grow skills at sales than it is to simply just focus on what you're good at. Because if you're an amazing director, you can cast a vision and get people to follow along with what you're doing, it's likely you should stay in that lane and be pushing those skills. And how do you grow that skill set? So when I think of pivoting out of weddings, I think it's really important that you think about what are you pivoting towards and not what are you pivoting away from. Real quick, let's just take a quick second to stop here. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer those questions. Now that we talked a bit more about what kind of worker you are, there's a poll about what kind of primary worker do you think you are? I'd love to if you could jump in there and answer that question if you had the chance to. And seeing how, yeah, awesome. Cool. All right, we're gonna get back into this then here. So the pivotal way, but not towards, is where I found myself at about the end of 2018. Having left the agency, I went down to take on a consulting position for a wedding filmmaking company. I worked with them as an integrator for 3 months. My job was purely about creativity and how do they grow their business. So asking questions like, well, who's the demographic? How do we book more weddings? How do we grow our team? How do we add on more filmmakers or kind of build out an associate program? How do we take the current sources of revenue and then multiply them into different areas of revenue? And that to me really spoke into what I really enjoy doing, which is this strategy. How do I think bigger about what we're doing? And what's really realistically what you need is you don't just need the strategy, but you also need the means to implement it. Because typically we're, as entrepreneurs or as wedding photographers or filmmakers, we're doing all 7 of these roles or all 6 of these roles. We're the director, the sales, the technician. And if you don't partition out time well to do all these different things, one of these jobs, if not multiple of these opportunities, are going to get kind of cast to the wayside. And that results in one thing being severely underworked. And so when I was able to take out the area of being a technician, the area of sales, the area of even being a part of the artistry of wedding editing for a filmmaking company, I was able to focus on directing, producing, and entrepreneurship. So working with this company allowed me to think greater and to think bigger about what their opportunities in the world could be. And so we were able to create a lot more income streams for them and create passive income models that really kind of to this day still exist in place. And it also allowed me to join the owner of that company and to spin off this entire separate company. And so when I say not a pivot towards, or not a pivot away, but towards something, I think it's really important that you think about where do you want to be working next. So assessing your skill sets and knowing yourself, and again, less focused on what are you bad at and how do you get better, and more about how do you keep improving what you're good at. And this is kind of where I want to talk about launching SETT, which is the creative agency that I run and one of the companies that I currently own. So with SETT, at the end of 2018, when I had a consulting position for 3 months, it was a retainer position. I knew it was temporary, but it allowed me to kind of springboard and take a leap of faith into leaving the agency, having somewhat of a salary, but then also jumping back into being self-employed again, because I realized that I operate better working for myself than I do working for other people. So in January of 2019, my good friend Josh Perez and I decided we were going to launch a photography studio for ourselves. And at the time, we knew there was a gap in the market, but we didn't really know what the gap was. And Josh had worked on brand side for a lot of brands. He worked for Topo Designs, for Rab. He worked for Magpul. He worked in marketing positions and in product development. He was a store manager in retail stores. So he was very familiar with a lot of the creative assets of what brands needed. And I was more familiar with the strategy side, and what agencies were trying to create and sell. And so we decided to start a company that was focused on a 2-person studio that was photography that would be able to solve problems for clients. So clients would come to us and say, we need photos for literally anything. And we would basically solve the problem by taking the photos or finding the right team for it. One of the immediate problems that we had was that messaging was incredibly complicated around a 2-person photo studio. Because if you use the word photo studio, like I just did, everyone imagines that you're in a building, in a room with a backdrop like this, shooting photos against it, and that you run a physical space. So photo studio was a little bit hard to use. We called it a creative studio. But what ends up happening when you launch a creative studio is that people come to you for all other kinds of work. So they come to you for web design or video. And at the time, we were really focused on staying in our lane. So, we're going to do just photography, and we're going to be really good at it. And we're going to try to fetch these, $3,000 day rates for a photo, plus tack in gear rental fees or other, fees for, grip and electric if needed. And then, ideally we can walk with a $5,000 shoot. And if we do enough of these, we'll scale. The problem with that thinking, though, is that it's the same with weddings. If you're doing a shoot for $1,000, which is pretty common for commercial, between $1,000 to $2,500 for a day rate as a photographer, you have to do so many jobs before you can make $100,000, $200,000. And my partner and I work 50-50. So everything we get, we split 100% down the middle. So with that, you literally have to make twice as much money doing that model as you do as a wedding photographer. So about 2 or 3 months, it took us about 5 or 6 months to really kind of start finding some of this footing with that. So today and I'll come back to this in a little bit, we have pivoted to becoming a creative agency, which is what we will get to in a little bit. So at the time we were a photo studio, and now we're a creative agency. And I want to kind of bridge that gap for you to kind of showcase what we've done and where we align now from where we started. Because I think if you can learn from our mistakes and learn from things that we did poorly, it can help you expedite where you're going and how you can get there much faster than if you just start reaching out to friends about taking photos for their businesses. Our first 5-figure job. So everyone wants to move into commercial because the money's better, allegedly. They move into commercial because they can make $2,500 for a day rate, and they can deliver 30 photos and shoot for 8 hours and call it good. Our first product we ever photographed was together as a new company, was this project, which is a project for Chaco, which is owned by Wolverine Worldwide, which is a footwear company in the US. It's actually a very massive footwear company. It was a $20,000 project. And again, this was our first project we'd ever done, ever. And so we had a very big learning curve walking into this project. First thing is we had no idea what we were doing. Second, we had to fulfill roles that we had never fulfilled before. So we were doing both art direction, photography, styling, casting, talent, location scouting. We were culling the photos, we were delivering the photos, editing the photos, we did PR management, we did gift creation, we did video, and we did wardrobe curation, which all these things are very common things to be doing on a shoot. We just didn't really know how you even do this stuff. How do you even start? So we literally got thrown into the fire. And that was a bit of our own kind of errors in doing that. But you don't really learn by staying safe. And so we had thrown ourselves into the fire. What we learned about this project was massive. We learned a couple things. First thing we learned is that it really helps to have a great team. So running things solo is not the ideal way to be running projects like this. And for myself, having worked as a solo wedding photographer for 7 years, that was a huge wake-up call. Because when I was working at the agency, I had a lot of camaraderie with my coworkers, and I really loved working alongside them. And going into working on another team, another project, you saw the amount of people that required to actually get the job done. So we ended up hiring out a stylist, we hired a PA, a production assistant, we had the client on location, we had 5 models that were there, we hired a location, and we rented a location, and then we had to do logistics around that as well too, the production around that, which is meaning buying everyone food, buying everyone breakfast, coffee, lunches, hotels for our talent. So we were pretty quickly thrown right into this. And if you're listening, you're like, holy crap, that sounds really scary. It was, because $20,000 at the time felt like the biggest thing we would ever touch ever. And we knew we had a lot riding on that job. We knew that if we screw this up, we'll probably never get a call back for this. And we'll have to pay out of pocket to make this happen. So we really got to do this right. And I think for myself and for Josh, that kind of urgency and that level of need to deliver really evoked in us a desire to get the project done. That was about 1.5 years ago now. And looking back, if we were to do the same project, we would do a million things differently. But I'm really glad we took the project. I'm glad we learned early on what it meant to actually have our hands on all the different things. Because if you're going to be moving into commercial photography, it's important to know all the different roles that exist. And it's very unlikely early on when you're starting your career that you will get hired only for one thing. They may only be paying you for one thing, but they are going to be asking you to do a lot more than that thing. They're going to say, hey, take photos of this product. And maybe it's some jewelry or it's a necklace. They might want you to take photos of the necklace, but what they're not saying is that you need to find somebody to photograph this on. I want talent, more or less. I want someone to wear it. I want them to look good, and I want good photos. So that job in and of itself has photographer, wardrobe, styling, and talent. And you as a photographer being told, I want photos of this necklace. So those are very different communication methods from what the client might want, especially if they're a smaller company, and what you as a photographer are providing. And what we learn now is how to charge for all those things individually, instead of being told, here's the scope, and realizing that it actually is 4 or 5 different things inside that scope. And we're supposed to deliver all of them for the budget of $1,500 for photography. So our first 5-figure job was definitely a learning process along that. Once you land a job like that, the next question is, how do you get more jobs? Because I think a lot of us have been, it's the same with weddings. People have asked us and said, how do you get your first wedding? A friend asks you something to shoot a wedding, you put a portfolio up, and then a lot of us have kind of sat passively behind and let word of mouth kind of roll for us, which does work. But ongoing work is so much more than just that. So the 3 ways we look at ongoing work for us is relationships, cold calls, and then I'm going to use it because it's a familiar term, is the wedding planner in quotes. Relationships, going back to talking about currency, relationships are going to be one of the most important and most valuable resources you have as a business owner, because every job that you come into connection with as a commercial wedding photography studio or photographer is going to be built off of some kind of knowledge base. Because if you have not worked in a corporate setting, what is not really told to everybody is that people, all they want to do is work with their friends. They want to goof off, hang with their friends, and work with people that they like. So if you have a connection for someone who works at a company, it's very likely that they would rather hire you, their friend, than hire anybody else, even if somebody else has superior work. So leveraging your relationships is really important. So and as a wedding photographer, it's likely, especially if you're working in the higher end form of wedding photography, doing $4,000, $5,000, $10,000 weddings, that a lot of your clients are pretty high profile or have access to money or decision makers in their industry. So I would say to start with commercial photography, you need to leverage your relationships and leverage your resources that you have. So every past client that you've known, it's time to hit them up and say, hey, I'm looking to do more work. I'm looking to do non-wedding work, and I'd love to help you with your brand. The second thing is going to be cold calls or cold emails. And it is crazy how much work you can kind of score from a cold email or a cold call. First off, it takes a lot of time. It is not fun. You don't get a lot of responses, but the payoff can be massive. And so it's really important that you can structure and think about how do you want to approach people that you don't know with a solution to a problem that they may not know that they have. And a lot of those do stem from some form of relationship. So I think the most iconic thing for us so far with this is that we had I Googled for the top performing companies in Colorado, which companies in Colorado are growing the fastest. And I found one in particular, and I found the CEO's information, and I emailed the CEO, and they were an email-based company. And I sent him an email and was really thoughtful in how I wrote it and said, hey, I'd love to meet you for coffee. I'd love to hear more about what you're doing. A week later, we had coffee. Very nice guy. But we kind of knew when we had coffee that there was probably not going to be anything that we were going to be able to work on quickly, because we were very different companies doing very different things. And what they needed for email was definitely geared for tech. What we were doing for photo at the time in particular was definitely geared towards physical products or brand ethos. Fast forward 6 months, and I emailed him about something else kind of out of the blue. The next day, he had emailed his personal assistant and said, hey, can you get a bid from Levi and Josh about doing some filmmaking for a conference that we're having? It resulted in almost a 5-figure job for us that we had essentially dug up purely from an email. And obviously it's more than email, it's an email into a conversation. It moves into a relationship, but that is a relationship that we started purely as SETT, as an agency, not from a prior experience. And so cold calls, they're scary, and it feels like you're wasting a lot of time, especially when you don't get responses, but they're actually really important to growing your business. Because you never know who's going to be hiring and when they're going to be hiring. We literally landed a job that we are currently working on right now that is a very high-paying job that is based off of an email that was sent by one of people who's working for us, who was checked in with a friend to see if they needed help with creativity, and it turned into a massive payoff. So knowing a cold caller is huge. The last thing I want to talk about is going to be the wedding planner. In terms of weddings, if you're wanting to book more weddings, what ends up happening and what you need to do early on, if you want to have people do the work for you for sales, is to get a wedding planner on your side to sell for you. Because realistically, if you got 3 wedding planners who are doing 10 weddings a year, each to send you 2 weddings, you could have 6 weddings, typically from higher budgets, typically people that are going to take care of most of the work and have an easier job doing it than trying to find those clients on your own. Wedding planners, in the same vein, exist in the commercial space, but in a different capacity. And it's things like a Chipotle, or it's things like a hotel chain. Because why would you go to a individual necklace company and shoot one job for them, when you could go to a hotel who has 8 different properties, and if you get hired by them, you could be doing 8 different jobs for them, all under one initial project. So there is a lot of conglomerates inside of commercial photography, inside of commercial creation, that are kind of grouped together, saying, if you reach out to one person, they might have a lot more work for you to do versus going to an individual business or individual provider for that service, because they might need photography, but they may not need it again for 6 months or a year from then. So knowing who to go to and who's going to be kind of the whale in terms of who's going to have the most amount of work from a variety of clients. And oftentimes, if you're working as an independent photographer, reaching out to an agency is a big thing too, because you can reach out to an actually operating agency who does full service creation. And they always need photographers to be doing projects for them. So thinking about connecting with other creative conglomerates who are doing projects for multiple clients is an easy way to start, or definitely a great place to start. One thing we want to talk about as well too is this concept of new clients versus retainers, because there is a very big discrepancy between these two kinds of clients. I don't have the data in front of me, so I'm not going to try to make something up, but it is a lot less work and it costs a lot less money and time to retain a client than it does versus bring on a new client. We have one client that we work for that we do shoots probably every 6 weeks for, that pays fairly well, and we can do additional work for them every other month or so. That results in a very consistent paycheck for us, and it ends up being like a 5 figures job over the course of a year for not a huge amount of time in terms of buy-in. That's from one client. And we were able to make the connection once, do an amazing job for them the first time. And now it's almost expected to get a call from them every 6 weeks. And so that alleviates our job of having to go out and find new jobs when clients can come to us. So having clients on retainer can be really, really helpful, because it lets you know that you have guaranteed work, even if it's small, and allows you to kind of grow with the company as well too, because sometimes those companies will grow incredibly fast. The downside of retainers, though, is that if you are relying on a major retainer and that client drops you, you could be losing a very big portion of your income. This happens with larger agencies all the time. They'll have a retainer client for $200,000 to $800,000 or upwards of $1 million. And those clients might choose a different agency. And now you've effectively eradicated hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of income. And so it's important to try to work to get retainer clients, but also not to work only for retainer clients. It's really important that you bring on new clients as well, because the retainer clients are great for paying the bills and having a bit more consistency, but there is a chance that they can move on. And so having contracts is really important, but also knowing that nothing is forever, nothing's permanent. All right. This is where I want to talk about pivoting yet again, because I think what I have learned anything from being in the commercial space versus the wedding space is that pivoting is essential to every single corner and every single facet of the business. One thing is, how do you make money in the commercial space? It's by taking risks, and it's by saying yes, which are often very entrepreneurial things that you bring into this, entrepreneurial skill sets you bring into this world, because realistically, saying yes to hard things is really scary, and taking risks, especially if you don't have a lot of capital or a lot of experience, can feel very daunting. Our very first project ever with Chaco was exactly that. Saying yes to $20,000 for a project, but not knowing if we were able to deliver what they wanted, or a full campaign lifestyle shoot, lookbook style shoot, is a scary thing to take off. But one thing we have learned is that the only way to actually grow and scale is to say yes and to take risks. That's how you make money in this space. Versus in weddings, I think you can be more selective. You can play it safe. At the end of the day, if you create a formula for how you create photographs, you can emulate that again and again and again, and you can get people to buy the exact same experience every single time. It can make the job more tedious, but it makes it very easy to deliver people what they want. With commercial, that safety net is kind of pulled back, because people will come to you and say, hey, I need product photography shot on white with a drop shadow. And if you've only shot lifestyle work, you might not know even where to begin with that. If you say no to the project, you could be leaving $10,000 on the table. If you say yes, you run the risk of taking $10,000 but having an unhappy client. So we've found ways to say, we will always find the team to grow with us. Another question to ask, though, with commercial is it enough to sustain? I'm just going to read this because I think this is really insightful. Your skill set will help you determine at what point commercial photography alone will be able to support you. If you're a technician, you may find yourself having the same problems in commercial as you did in weddings, which is to say, depending on your skill set and the jobs that you have, they may not translate very well to commercial without some form of remodifying or changing the way you approach the business. So a lot of people that I know in weddings work as technicians. They're amazing photographers. They're amazing photo editors. They're not crazy savvy with the business. And so all the frustrations that they have around getting new clients or around delivering on time, those things are all going to exist. Those problems will still exist inside the commercial space. Delivering things on time, you will be behind a computer editing. You'll be running a business. You'll be trying to grow it and get new clients. And the problems you had with weddings will still exist. It'd be hard to find new clients, and you have to branch out and find new ways to gain them. If your work stands out enough, you can expedite or kind of move around that a lot. However, there is some level of buy-in on the client side. And so you have to have some level of business skills or acumen to be able to push out and to get yourself and your work known and seen by other people. So it's important to know that just pivoting alone isn't going to solve the problems that already exist. If you don't like business in weddings, you're not going to like business in commercial. If you work as an amazing photographer in weddings, you're likely to work as an amazing photographer in commercial. If you've been amazing at closing deals and closing sales in weddings, you can probably translate that to commercial. Your skills will translate, but so will your problems. That's really important to know. All right. So I want to talk about the future, because the future for us is a lot different than what we would have thought it was a year ago. And I know that for you, the future is going to be a lot different a year from now than you thought it is today. What's next for us? So as you can probably tell, I am an entrepreneur. I have this affinity to wanting to start new things. One of the problems we had with SETT that I mentioned earlier is that we were a photo studio. We were this duo of two guys trying to create photography that was interesting and good. And while we focused on good product, we honestly wanted photo that was good enough for the brand, because brands care so much less than you might think that they do, because people don't own the brands. If you're working for a bigger company, the employee working for them may not be as tied to the photography of the brand as you are, or as you think the audience is. And they didn't start the company, so they could care a little bit less. So we want to make photography that was great, but didn't want to sacrifice the ability to move quickly. But what ends up happening is when you're doing that, as two guys running a photo studio with the messaging not being super clear, is that people don't know what to do with your business. They don't know how to hire you. One of our ongoing clients that we had last year and didn't work for this year was Huckberry. Huckberry is an online men's journal. They are a marketplace. They sell all kinds of clothing. They also do articles and journals and amazing newsletter as well that they send out on a regular basis, probably 2 or 3 times a week. So Huckberry, they would ask us, like, hey, who's actually doing the photography? Is it Levi? Is it Josh? Is it somebody else? Like, do you want us to pay for 2 people? We don't really need 2 people. So the problem around our company that we had was that it was pretty hard to message to our clients what we were. That created a lot of tension. The second thing that we were uncovering is that we knew that what we were doing for brands was helpful, that we could do the skill set of actually making a bigger campaign for them. However, brands didn't always trust you, and they also like to play it safe. The whole point for brands is to mitigate risk by playing things safe. So if they can go ahead and get pretty good photos for them are better than amazing photos if there's a big risk on the table, if it's something they never worked with before, because they know that what they currently have sells, so that's sufficient for them. So getting people to buy into all the skills that we could do was a harder sell. So we talked to a friend of ours, Mark, who owns Tempo Designs, and he kind of told us to start leveraging our skills in a different way. So in addition to launching SETT and having SETT run, we launched a new brand called Pedro & Taylor. And Pedro & Taylor is a menswear brand or a lifestyle brand, mostly geared towards menswear, that's rooted in celebrating the cultures of where Josh and I originate. We're both Hispanic and Latinx. And so we want to celebrate our cultures and our stories and our families with products. So this coat that I'm wearing is a product that we're launching in the fall, as is the t-shirt. We actually have that one in stock now. These things that we said is, if we can create the brand and we can create the assets, the product development, the photography, the visuals, the campaigns, the web development, if we can do everything for a brand, and we can show them start to finish what we can do for their brand. So we started Pedro & Taylor initially as a case study of saying, if we launch a brand, our own brand, we can tell, if anyone comes to us and says, hey, are you able to do this? We can go in and tell them, like, here's our case study, like, you tell us. And then they can decide from there if they want that or not, which has been really pivotal for us in taking on new clients now, because clients are starting to recognize and see the work we're doing for other companies or for ourselves, and asking us to do that similar kind of work for themselves. Also, it's expanded our whole entire wealth of knowledge around business. So we've learned about funding, we learned about investments, we learned about investment law inside of Colorado, we learned about product development, we learned about tech backs and about creating products from scratch. We've learned a lot of things along the way that it can enhance us as we move forward with the brand. Meaning that if a company comes to us and says, we need photography, but what we really need is a product and we need a strategy, we can actually start activating those things now and say, we can actually help you make a product from nothing. We can also help you develop a strategy and a story around your product. Second thing is we're exploring more of our roles inside of SETT and other businesses. So Josh is primarily relationship master, amazing at making connections, amazing at marketing. So Josh survives and thrives in the marketing role for SETT and for Patron Taylor. And I primarily live on the CEO side of it, being more of strategy, vision casting, and day-to-day details. I love logistics. I love tech. I love creating websites. I love every single finite thing that we can find about a physical product. I love knowing where do these buttons come from? How much do they cost? How much does this unit cost? How do we get all the margins down? And how do we ship it better from Guatemala to here? That to me is fascinating. Whereas Josh is saying, how do we get this amazing product that we can actually sell to the world? So we're also learning how to live inside of our roles. So myself being more of a director and entrepreneur, and Josh being more of I guess probably an artist too, solving problems around things. And Josh being more of a closer, being a producer, and being a technician inside and the relational aspect of that. And so those things I think are pivotal. And the last thing is that I kind of clued this up earlier, is that we have transitioned SETT from being a commercial photo duo to being a full service creative agency. And the reason for that was that we recognized that one, our messaging was bad around being a photo studio or a creative agency. We also realized that we were leaving a lot of money on the table by not saying yes to other jobs. If a client came to us for photography but needed video and we didn't offer video, we were leaving $5,000 to $25,000 on the table that was accessible, that we knew that we could help manage and project manage that project and make more money off of that. We also know that it's really important to own the ecosystem for a brand if you really want to generate more income, because I think we realize inside of our skill sets that we want to grow a business. We don't want to be technicians. We don't want to be photographers forever. We want to be building systems that grow. And I think it's really, but you will never know that until you actually start doing the things. I am more excited about hiring my friends who are amazing photographers to shoot incredible campaigns for our agency than I am to being the person that presses the shutter myself, because I want to come up with the ideation behind the process more than I actually want to go and hit the shutter. I also know that I have incredibly talented friends who can do the job better than I could, and it's a win for all of us. We can get paid, they can get paid, we can create jobs, create amazing content, and it's better for the client overall. And so that is how and why we are pivoting from being this photo duo to being a full service creative agency, because it makes more sense for us to be able to make more money, build up bigger teams, and solve bigger problems by owning the entire chain and owning the entire channel down the road. One of our clients now is hiring us for strategy. And so they're coming to us to do demographic study and research data on their new location. The thing is, inside of that, there are almost infinite amounts of spring points from there where we can provide services for them because of our being positioned as an agency. We can do graphic design for billboards and for in-store flyers and promotional banners. We can do photography because they're a grocery store and have lots of products to photograph. We can do marketing for them. We can do video. We can do web development. We can do app creation. It's literally limitless in what's possible. But if we only said we were doing photography, we would be very restricted in what we're capable of doing. So for us, it's really important that we go back to the camera here. It's really important for us then to own the whole channel and grow, because that's where our skill sets lie. Our skill sets lie not in the technician side of being a photographer, but they lie more so in the growth and strategy behind the brand. And my question to you, as you think about pivoting out of wedding photography or wedding video or weddings in whatever capacity into another form of business, is what are your skill sets? And what do you offer the world, and where are you different than other people? Because the problems you have will exist across the board, but your strengths will also exist across the board. And it might be that you don't want to be just a photographer, but you want to be more of a brand specialist or a director of some kind. And that is where I think you will differentiate yourself and also have the least amount of pain launching a new business, because the pivot out of weddings is really, really hard if you don't know where you're going. And honestly, when Josh and I launched SETT, we didn't know where we were going. And it's taken us 18 months to find our footing and to find our path. And I feel like right now we are on a really great and amazing trajectory for growth, but it was a lot of wandering in the wilderness to get there. And it's helpful to save some of the pain by staying out of the wilderness if you can, and focusing on the skills that you have. That is the general overview of where we've been and how we pivoted out of weddings into commercial. I'm seeing questions rolling here now. I would love to, let's dive into some of these questions. If you have a question, hop over to Q&A and drop them in there. I'd love to answer any questions. I'll try to be as transparent as I can about answering questions about anything from wedding photography to commercial to Pedro and Taylor to everything in between entrepreneurship. Feel free to drop a question in there and we will roll from there. So the first question here is from Mark. How did you know what to charge for commercial jobs when starting out? Honestly, it's guesswork. And even to this day, it's still guesswork. But I think it's important to kind of know what you want to be making. Those things stay the same. We have learned that there are industry averages across the board for what you're doing. So if you're a photographer, a day rate of $1,500 is a pretty standard place to start. Obviously, you can go up to $2,500 to $5,000 to even beyond that. But $1,500 as a day rate, and that's typically going to be 8 hours for the day and around 20 to 30 deliverables, which is 20 to 30 edited photos. What's really important, though, is that you know how to talk about those things. So you can say, hey, how many photos do you need? Asking that question up front is a big deal. So they say, I need 300 photos. Either their expectations are totally misaligned and you have to play catch up on expectations, or they're going to kind of work you for all that you have, and it might not be worth the job unless you need the money. So knowing those places is really helpful. Cool. Another question. How do you effectively communicate, cold calls especially, your value prop as a full service agency while not being specialized in a skill set? That's a very good question. I think what's really important is having examples of what you can do. And I think it comes down to this mentality that people want to hire a friend and someone that they trust. And they almost will trust you to get the job done if you say you can do it, more so than requiring proof. And so I think it means being well read on what you're offering, knowing what the problems are, and listening really well. If you can listen to what the client wants, you can repeat back to them those things and say, hey, I am offering you X, Y, and Z because that's what they have told you. And you communicating clearly on that is really important. Now, you might, on your side, be taking on the side of risk, saying, they expect me to do web dev. I don't know anyone who does web dev. Now I got to find someone to do web dev. That is part of the problem-solving side of being a full-service agency. But the value prop as a full-service agency, it comes down essentially to saying, like, hey, trust us. And usually that happens by getting on the phone, being able to listen well to the problems, because a lot of times a lot of agencies don't listen very well to their clients, which is why they end up losing jobs. All right. How did you get a first shoe gig or any commercial gigs in general when you had no portfolio? Normally, a wedding-only portfolio would be a deterrent for a brand to want to hire for commercial projects. That is a great question. And this is where the relationships piece is pivotal, because Josh, my business partner, had worked product side for so many brands. He worked for Topo, worked for Rab. And while he was working product side for a lot of brands, he made a lot of relationships. So when we were launching SETT, Josh hit up every contact in his Rolodex and said, hey, this is what we're doing. Here's the portfolio that we have. I had primarily only a wedding portfolio, and Josh had a non-wedding portfolio. It wasn't expansive, but there was a lot of baseline stuff. He had a lot of stuff inside of there so it's very general, but it was definitely very thorough. And so he called a friend of his who was a creative director at Chaco. And the relationship existed already, and it moved into landing a job. And I think the way, even showcasing how this relationship works. So, if you don't know, Josh and I both have lots of tattoos. You can see here. The CD for Chaco is a great guy, and he likes to do stick and poke tattoos. So he brought a stick and poke kit, and him and Josh knew each other before. And he gave Josh a stick and poke tattoo one of the nights of the shoot. We were all staying in a hotel. And that is this level of like client camaraderie that we kind of grown and experienced with people. But when you have existing friendships, it's also knowing how to get in the weeds with them. If they love something, you like something. And realistically, like if you watch the show Mad Men, you know that there's a lot of those things that are still at play. It's still relationships. It's still wining and dining. It's still getting a meal and getting a drink. Obviously, there's a lot of sleazy things in Mad Men that you want to like leave behind and leave back in the 50s and 60s. And as we move forward as a culture, however, people want to work with their friends. So making friends is a big deal. All right, let's see here. Disney as a client. So that's a good question. Yes, we do have Disney as a client. Those things come through connections via friends. Again, we have friends that run production companies and production agencies, and they are the ones sourcing jobs for the people as well too. So it's not just about jobs that you do and bring in as your own agency. It's also, there is a lot of work that you do alongside, very parallel to what you're doing. So for example, we work as a creative agency. We have friends that work only as production agencies, meaning they do zero creative. They literally source logistics for brands. So we are an easy place for them to go to source creative for the brands that they're already sourcing for. So there's a lot of agencies that work in tandem who only do one thing or the other. We do production and do logistics, but not nearly as well as this other agency. And if this other agency, if I was a household name brand like Disney or Hollister or someone else, I would probably go to them versus us if I'm being candid. But knowing them and having connections there helps us also work on the same projects together and provide amazing creative support for them. It allows them to sell the job. So everything got to take on, even these roles of skill sets can be extrapolated beyond just individuals into entire companies themselves. All right. Question from Brad. How's work-life balance between stepping into multiple ventures? How does it compare to your previous work-life balance as a wedding photographer? Balance is always hard. That's just flat out. If you're owning your own thing, it's hard. I think it's harder for myself than it is for other people because I currently own 4 companies, SETT, Pigeon Tailor, Kona and Gamut, a company that sells wedding LUTs, and my own wedding photography brand. I'm doing very little work with my own wedding photography brand currently, so that is maybe more like 3 companies. So splitting up time is complicated, and that's where it takes a pretty clear and concise role of expectations. I think it's also being really clear with your partner about what your expectations are and what workload you can handle. My wife and I have communicated pretty clearly about what those things look like and how do you take time to rest, how do you take time to put your phone down. Those are still boundaries I need to be better at setting, but there is much more of a communication around those topics. Also, having a family kind of forces your hand in some things. So at 5:30, my daughter walks in my office and she wants to talk and she wants to play. My wife wants to cook dinner. My wife is a natural food chef. She loves to cook food, and it's better for her to cook food when my daughter is not bothering her or trying to get her attention. So we each divide roles, or we'll flip that where I'll cook and she'll play with our daughter on days that she's working. But it's all about kind of having clear communication, and that's where I would start. And between multiple ventures, I probably wouldn't bite off as much as we have bitten off because it's a lot. But I think having clear communication is good. And it kind of rolls into another question, which is tips for working with a business partner. I could not be doing what I'm doing now without partners. So Josh is my partner in Pigeon Tailor and in SETT. Those are primarily take up the majority of my workload. My friend Kaylin Rome is my partner in Gamut. And Kaylin also runs White and Reverie, a filmmaking company, a very well-known filmmaking company. Literally all those companies would not exist with probably just one person inside the company. So it's also taking the time to know your skill sets and knowing when you should actually have a partner. So for myself, having a partner is massive because one of us can be working at all times, even if the other person is working. And that's also like, I think in a very holistic and healthy way. So Josh had his brother come into town from Florida, and I met up with them for coffee one day, but it was truly like a really rewarding thing for me that I could be getting a proposal out to the client while Josh was having coffee with his brother, because I knew that me working meant that Josh could do that. And it didn't mean that the job was getting kind of overlooked or wasn't being taken care of. So having a business partner, I think, is really, really important, but having someone that you have a good working relationship with is key as well too. Josh and I have a lot of really good rapport. We definitely balance each other out. We definitely have different skill sets in a lot of ways, but we also have a lot of common interests. And so our wives are also very close friends. So our lives are very meshed together between him and I. And I'd really encourage, if you are looking for a business partner, make sure you pick a good partner, because that's something you can't undo. And getting along is really important, and having a relationship is really important. Working together is really important. Being able to delegate tasks to each other is really important. So for a business partner, there's a lot of things we could talk about that. But if you are trying to do this on your own, and you want to be more than a technician, I would definitely encourage you to look for a business partner or to find someone who's like-minded. What do you miss from wedding photography and what not? There's 2 questions. What do you miss from wedding photography and what not? And then would you still shoot a wedding? Would I still shoot a wedding? The answer is yes, but I'd be a lot more selective around shooting the wedding than I would be before. Before, when it was a job, you kind of have to say yes to weddings. Now I would definitely say yes to a wedding because I still enjoy them, but there'd be a lot of things about it that I'd want to make sure are there. And that kind of goes into what do you miss from a wedding and whatnot. What I miss is getting the chance to visit really obscure random places, where that is like a small little like villa in like the middle of nowhere, Italy, that I would never go to again. Or on the flip side, like a small, tiny little town in Iowa that I would never have the chance or never the reason to go see again. That's pretty cool to me. I think that's a really amazing thing that you don't often get with commercial. You can, but you don't. I definitely miss that from weddings. We don't travel as much as we did with weddings. We travel quite a bit now, but with weddings, you could kind of see a lot of places, and I could easily daisy chain a lot of things together. So I had a wedding in Bali. I was able to take my wife out there with me and spend a week in Bali, which was an incredible way to have a vacation. We don't have as many opportunities now for that with commercial to be doing that. However, we also can work remote for a lot of what we're doing as well. So we can still do those same things. It just transitions a bit more of how we do it. Yeah. Those are, I got texted a question, and I think it's okay to answer because I think I want to be transparent here. Basically, a friend asking, what is your income like for weddings versus commercial? Varies a lot, honestly. It's hard to tell because for weddings, I had business for 7 years, and now with commercial, I've had business for 18 months. So those things vary a lot. Plus, we're also splitting money in half. But being really candid, the money right currently for commercial is less than weddings, but has the potential to be a lot more so. And so for us now, we are taking on projects with SETT that we can never touch in terms of like financial figures. We can never touch that with weddings. And it allows us to scale up in a huge way, because with the scale, we can take on a lot more things with that, and we can hire more people. We can do a bigger team. We can actually do less work and actually make money. Where with weddings, you can't really work, and you can't really make money without working unless you've dialed in the preset game or some form of passive income or education. So for us, growing a team with an agency is a lot more conducive to us making a lot more money. And the goal too is also depends on the other goals that you have with that. How do you leverage your business in that way too? So income is different now, but I imagine very quickly that's going to change. But like everything else, it takes a bit of getting off the ground. And also it's also how you leverage assets. We took a lot of our own personal money to put into launching Patron Taylor. So those things also kind of balance out too, like the money that you make versus the money that you put into something. So there is an element of like, it's going to take something, it's going to cost you something to launch this business. However, it does, the future payoff is going to be much more substantial. All right, I'm gonna go through the chat. Awesome, guys. This has been really awesome. If you have any questions, you can email me. My name is Levi Tijerina. My email is gonna be Levi, L-E-V-I, @SETT.studio. I think this will be up on YouTube. You can reference if you want. Happy to answer any more questions or run through any thoughts. Thanks for joining in today and taking the time out of your day. It means a lot to me. And I hope that you got value out of this and really learned a lot about stepping into the next phase. Thanks so much, guys. We'll catch you all soon.